Hi everyone, I'm Hassan. Welcome to Open Source Live, where we're talking to the leading experts in open source and AI. Very excited to have Philippe on and joining us today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here, Hassan.
Yeah. Why don't you start with giving us a quick overview of your background and how you got into open source?
Yeah, so I'm at Neo4j, CTO. I've been with the company 13 years. And as those of you familiar with Neo4j probably know, Neo4j is, from the beginning, has been a very strong promoter, producer, and community organizer in open source, which of course you have all those elements, right? It's about people and community and activity as much as it is about producing software. Again, and if you look at our entire stack, it's from the core database itself, Community Edition, GPL v3, and then a whole bunch of connectors, adapters, and more recently is knowledge graphs are becoming really useful in a GenAI context. Open source software around doing text to graph, querying, and then doing text to graph conversion of like creating a graph. So. Open source is one of my favorite topics. I'm glad we're here.
Awesome. So let's start very broad, which is just in the next year, what is something that you're really excited about seeing happen within the open source ecosystem?
I'll pick on two if that's okay. So one is just the community that's coming together to advocate for, but more importantly, advocate with code around AI. Because ultimately we've all seen the impact of Llama, DeepSeek, innovations at the LLM layer. But then if you climb up the stack, there's innovations at every layer from frameworks, LangChain, Llama Index, Haystack, and the rest. Lately, what's been really exciting is all the different memory frameworks. So Zep and Mem0 and so on, which we work with all these, so I get to see it firsthand. As well as all the way on up to, all the way on up the stack to drivers and so on. The other thing that's been personally exciting to me is it seems we accidentally built a product that is really solving some really valuable problems in GenAI, maybe around getting better answers, explainability, adding security and privacy controls for the kinds of applications where that's useful. And so, because the world of technologies, especially infrastructure, is very developer-led. It's as much our community that's discovering new patterns as fast or faster than us. So there's a virtuous cycle there. And so very excited about just what's happening with GenAI and both driving it, but then also sitting back and watching it because there is a huge community element to it.
No, and I think it's so important, kind of all the work that's happening in kind of the knowledge graph space, the vector DB space equally as well. Because the storage and the memory components is one of those areas where these any of the AI models, actually, open source or not, are really struggling in, right? And being able to provide the right relevant information to the model becomes incredibly important for pretty much almost any application.
You need knowledge, and you need knowledge in a form that can be understood by humans and operated upon by machines. And knowledge graphs give you that. It sort of fills this, in this world of, there was talk 20 years about in research on neurosymbolic AI, but it's sort of popping up in the form of LLMs and graphs. And what's cool with knowledge graphs and GraphRAG is you can slide the scale between how much of the decisioning and the reasoning happens in the LLM or in the graph or in the LLM informed by the graph. And you mentioned vectors, like there's vector-only databases. There's also, vector, as a database person, I see as a data type with some indexes around it. And so, much as Mongo and Postgres and others have added a vector data type, Neo4j's got that as well. The other thing that's interesting from a knowledge and memory perspective is the little known fact, you often need far fewer tokens to, if you're informing the LLM with sort of like very fine-tuned is probably an overrated word. Let's say targeted information about the thing that you're looking for. So Gartner just released a piece a month ago or so saying that from what they've observed from the customers they've surveyed, somewhere between 25 and up to 97% reduction in the number of tokens when you're doing in GraphRAG, which in a CPU, GPU constrained environment, it's really, really helpful to be able to squeeze more cycles out of LLMs. And of course that reduces latency, reduces costs, so it's good all around.
No, I think that's a really great point in terms of kind of the infrastructure requirements, right? I mean, there's definitely the storage requirements, and that's absolutely critical, but like, in terms of what you need to actually scale out, if you're able to do more by using the information smarter, that's really key to drive efficiency. And the reality is AI demand is growing so significantly and so fast. We need efficiency at multiple layers of the stack to really help use the resources that we have today to drive innovation into tomorrow.
That's right. Like, we still need the super efficient chips,
Yep.
and then all the model tips and tricks and efficiencies.
Yep.
But yeah, anything you can do in addition to that to reduce the cycles needed by a model is great.
Where are you seeing open source drive a lot more efficiency from your perspective?
I guess DeepSeek is maybe a good example insofar as they built on Llama quite heavily, but they also built on open research, which maybe isn't literally open source, but it certainly follows the spirit of open source that much of AI depends on research that was done in the public and is out there. And so the efficiencies that they delivered in their model on the inference and on the training side, who knows? I mean, the training side, there's been a lot of debate, but let's at least take for granted the inference side, that's entirely based on open source and open research. You wouldn't have a DeepSeek without that basis. Yeah,
no, I think that's a really great example. How do you see kind of the open source stuff at Neo4j and any other kind of more of the parallel frameworks, if you will, also helping to drive efficiency gains as well?
I'd say insofar as open source provides a very, let's say, rich field of fertile soil, in which case there are a lot of different techniques that then become available as infrastructure, and people can just pick and choose and play with them. And there are so many people playing with them, and then agents increasingly are able to play with them and just try out different things. So it really helps with trial and error, because if you imagine a world without open source, you'd have a very small number of vendors, even smaller because of the capital requirements for some of this stuff. And so, many fewer options for individual thing. And so the number of combinatorial options would be, I don't know, like 10 orders, maybe not that, but like many orders of magnitude smaller.
Yeah, and you mentioned agents. So I think one of the things that it feels recent, but at the same time, I feel like in AI that things move so fast and they're changing all the time. But we're starting to see some sort of standards emerge, whether that's on the MCP side or agent-to-agent communication. How do you see standards kind of impacting how developers think about everything that they're building, whether that's in the open source space, whether that's in agent space, or anything in between?
The way, for new technologies, like the way standards typically do and should work is there should be broad experimentation in the field, and then as you lock down and narrow down the techniques based on practical real-world experience, maybe multiple iterations of de facto standards emerge where there's a natural convergence towards certain techniques or languages or frameworks or APIs because they're good and they work. And then out of that, at the very end of the funnel, can come standards bodies and de jure standardization. It hasn't always worked that way, and in cases where it doesn't work that way, you end up having de jure standards that nobody uses. And in the AI space, a lot of this is so new that there are no de jure standards, and but you have like agent-to-agent protocol, MCP, which are very promising and evolving, and lots of people are pointing out what are the gaps around, for example, authentication, authorization in MCP. Let's fix that. It'll show up in a further iteration. What's actually, been is sort of unique about knowledge graphs in the AI layer, even though in some ways they're just starting to heat up now, so they're maybe a little bit later in the hype cycle than LLMs and vectors. They're actually one of the few pieces in the AI stack that is standardized, because in 2015, Neo4j open sourced our query language Cypher, which has since become a de facto standard. And we actually started working inside of ISO, joined ISO in 2018, 2019, and became members of the ISO SQL committee, working towards a sibling language to SQL, which is complementary. Turns out it's like composable, etc. It leverages a lot of SQL, like the language already inherently did. But it actually formalizes that part of that. Why is that important? It's important for all the reasons standards have always been important. If I'm a technologist invest in skills, I want to know that I can use those skills with different technologies on different projects. If I'm a CIO and I'm investing in technologies, I want to know that I don't have vendor lock-in. We like to earn business, not lock people in. But then what's new with models is models need to learn these languages and APIs. And so if you have just one standard way of doing things, the models will get trained on that, and then the models become competent about translating from human language to the standard language for whatever that interface is, database in this case. So I'd say standards become more important in a world of models because it makes human to machine language translation all the better, which will just accelerate innovation.
No, and I think it's really helpful for the developer community in general, so that we're all talking the same language, and then educating also kind of on the same principles, which makes innovation happen a lot more rapidly. You've been in the open source community for quite some time. How do you see developers communities kind of emerging around open source and creating that flywheel effect of innovation that further drives more improvements and further accelerates all of the innovation that we are already seeing happen in AI?
So it comes back to community, and so where do communities occur? There's, I'm personally always a fan of physical events, meetups. I remember holding meetups in our tiny office in San Mateo, California, back in the day, and we'd have 12 people show up, but you do it consistently, regularly. So consistency, and so that people know that they're invited and they can show up when they, when they show up. Obviously, there's a virtual component to that, so having ways that people can show up and showcase. So we love, and the community loves, to be able for us to have their technology showcased and to present to the larger community of users and potential customers, and for companies that have their own SaaS products that they're selling. This can become a way for them to gain awareness. So that's a real flywheel in and of itself. So as an example of one of the things we do is we have once a year we do a 24-hour conference. It's all live, and it's 100+ talks. And it's running all time zones across all continents. Follow the sun, they're all recorded. Obviously that all becomes fodder for models to be trained. And then then there's the code base itself. So successful open source projects almost always, if not always, have a steward, and that steward tends to be a company that is behind the project. In our case, our entire business is behind this project. You've got some companies that are much larger where they might have many open source projects, and they're, maybe a bit, okay, let's open source as an afterthought. But then you miss the community stewardship. And then that community stewardship can emerge from outside of that company. I'd say that's a key ingredient as well. And then there's a key question of okay, what, as an open source steward, what are you trying to invite in terms of contributions to different layer in the stack.
Yeah.
It's not too many contributions inside of the database kernel because it's just such a time commitment to be able to understand what even happens inside of there. And we've got full-time team members that do that. So that's maybe less impactful, less valuable than, and a harder, less low-hanging fruit than, okay, let's do integrations between two technologies that haven't been connected, or do things that are specific to an industry. So things that are maybe more vertical, higher in the stack, UI oriented, and that's where we see the most community activity.
And is that because it's a lot, I guess, easier to kind of get involved and contribute? Or do you think that's where also a lot of the most amount of innovation can happen too?
I think that's where you can have most entirely new blue sky things happen.
Yeah.
If you're inside the database kernel or deep inside someone's tech, like there's a defined roadmap and multiple parts moving all at once, and it's a very complex technology. And so you might have an individual contributor spend months just trying to unpack and understand the tech before they can understand what they can do with it. Whereas these days, like, you pull out a V0 or a Lovable or, Cursor or the like, and you can vibe code some super cool interface that is going to, be really exciting and used by lots of people. So the closer you are to the front end, the more I think you can do totally out of the box things with relative ease that are really exciting to people.
Yeah, I think that's 100% right, and it's already really exciting to see, especially at the top of the stack too, where all of that innovation is happening, and AI is making that a lot more accessible and easier for developers to engage. Switching gears a little bit to kind of open source models and kind of the AI ecosystem, how are you seeing that from your perspective in terms of adoption by developers? And especially in the context of knowledge graphs as well, do you see them kind of starting to build more and more in the AI ecosystem or that is open source, or do you still think there are use cases where the closed source models are still have kind of a niche or differentiation?
What the pattern I normally see is starting with a GPT or a Claude or some advanced foundation model. Because those are so generalized and they can be great for doing general purpose experimentation. And then coming in with open source models underneath that, once you have kind of proven out the idea and that it works. Because if you use smaller models, then you can use multiple smaller models for individual tasks, get much cheaper cost, better latency, fine-tune, to purpose. And then, graphs I see coming in historically, because it's a bit later in the hype cycle, people have been discovering them after nothing else worked.
Sure.
Now there's the opportunity to realize and pattern match and say, look, if the data that I'm dealing with, real or digital world, is shaped like a network or a hierarchy or a path or a journey, or if I'm bringing data together, I need to connect it from multiple silos in an organization. The graph is the best case to do it. I might as well use that up front and just have that be part of my stack instead of trying everything under the sun and it's burning a lot of cycles.
It's funny how we move so fast from RAG to agents to even more complicated agent-to-agent communication as well. But I think there's still so much we haven't figured out and fully optimized when it comes to even kind of the simplest basic RAG applications. And I think there's a lot there even on the knowledge graph side as well that I'm sure developers are still learning and experimenting with. What is something that you would advise to someone maybe who's still kind of getting new into the space and learning the ropes of AI, how they should be thinking about knowledge graphs, building out RAG applications, to kind of further improve kind of the ecosystem as a whole?
So I'd recommend starting with, so there are a bunch of resources, let me just call those out and then I'll summarize what some of them say conceptually. There's GraphRAG.com, where we just aggregate in, like there's one section where it's all the research. As soon as we spot a research paper from anyone on GraphRAG, we'll plop it in there. And there are probably 20, 30, I checked this morning. There's a bunch of different information on different patterns, on different kinds of graphs, like sliced different ways. So like different kinds of memory, procedural memory, temporal memory, ontological memory, etc. As well as, so that's one. Another one is there are various simple like 1 hour knowledge graph trainings that you could do. There's one at deeplearning.ai. We've got something, kind of a whole knowledge center as well called Graph Academy. But a few key concepts to understand is, first of all, there are multiple kinds of graphs. So the obvious one is the domain graph. It's the graph of whatever part of the world you're trying to model. So it's the things and relationships there. People, places, things, payments, biology, whatever. The less obvious one is the lexical graph, which you can actually have a graph of the structure of the vector chunks. So it's like chunk, next chunk, next chunk.
Interesting,
And this chunk is in this place, on this page, in this document. You know, is it like in a cell in a table? Means it's probably better curated than if it's in body text. And then maybe a title might be somewhere in between. And then down to where are the authors. And so it gives you something that's finer grained and navigable than just like a more faceted search type thing. But then you can connect that structural graph to the domain graph and do cool, like run graph algorithms to do, so let me call out a few graph patterns. So the most common pattern that most people start with is, I'm just going to do a vector search, but then I might have a bunch of chunks that have a similarity that's pretty close. With GraphRAG, you can actually use a graph algorithm ahead of time to populate a property by which you can rank order your vector results. So vector ranking. By the same token, you can filter your vector results, filter in or out based on a pattern match, which could be one level out, but it could be more complex. Another one is I'm going to just start in, and I'm going to expand out and bring back the world around this chunk or this concept, feed it to the model. And then another pattern is certain questions that have exact answers that maybe require multiple hops and require math, like supply chain risk calculation. That's like, might be a 20 level deep thing with math. An LM isn't going to be great at that, and even if it were, like, it would take forever and chug away. Whereas that query will run in milliseconds in a graph and give you an exact answer and be fully explainable. You can even visualize the results as a graph. So that's a case where you do like text decipher, and it will, and you actually delegate the question to the graph and then hand it back to the model, and it does whatever it does. So those are a few of the different patterns. But there's a lot more, and I'd invite listeners to check it out.
And I mean, I think those are some great resources as well for people to try out. Maybe the last thing to wrap up here is really more kind of a futuristic thing. If you were to complete the sentence, in the next 5 years, open source will fill in the blank, what would that be?
Will remain a key component of all AI infrastructure and every AI application, like across the entire stack.
I'm looking forward to seeing more and more innovation and excitement happening. It's an exciting time, definitely, and appreciate you sharing your thoughts here today on all of your learnings as we continue to see open source grow.
Thanks for taking the time and hosting. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yeah.